Well, cannabis has got many chemicals in it, and some are called plant cannabinoids or phytocannabinoids, and the number of those seems to be growing every week, month, year. The current number I've been given very recently was 105, so 105 phytocannabinoids, and in addition to that about at least 400 other compounds as well. Certainly for pharmacological interest and for potential medicines, there's one interesting one called beta-caryophyllene, which is also in other plants.
Black pepper.
Yeah, and very recently a chap called Gerd showed it that it can activate CB2 receptors, cannabinoid receptors. So it's also a cannabinoid which can activate those receptors. But it's not what we call a phytocannabinoid because it's structurally quite different. So what we have are these two compounds that you mentioned, cannabidiolic acid, which is actually the precursor of cannabidiol in the plant. So what happens is the plant contains mainly cannabidiolic acid when it's growing. If the plant is heated or stored for a long time, then the cannabidiolic acid gradually converts to cannabidiol. If it's heated, it happens quite quickly. It's the same actually with THC. It's formed from an acid. And so that's why people have to heat cannabis if they want to get high. They have to heat it in some way to form enough THC. And the same applies to cannabidiol. We've been studying both cannabidiol and cannabidiolic acid quite recently. And what we found was that, firstly, that cannabidiol can target receptors known as 5-HT1A receptors. And cannabidiol works quite potently at doing that. And what it does is to enhance the ability of drugs which activate those receptors. It enhances their ability to produce that activation, and that could have a number of therapeutic benefits. For example, anti-nausea, to name but one, but there are others. Cannabidiolic acid, we discovered, to our surprise, could do the same thing, but much more potently than cannabidiol. And also, they both have what we call bell-shaped dose-response curves. So very low doses, they don't do anything. Very high doses, they don't do anything on this receptor. But in between, you get this bell-shaped dose-response curve, and it's much broader, this bell-shaped dose-response curve for cannabidiolic acid than for cannabidiol, which is quite narrow. So if we want to exploit the effect on the 5-HT1A receptor, then probably for a potential medicine, cannabidiolic acid may be more what we call druggable, maybe a better bet for a medicine than cannabidiol for that purpose. If you look at the literature, there are a number of things which cannabidiol does, apparently by somehow acting through 5-HT1A receptors. It can protect from stroke, has a protective effect in stroke, anxiety, an anti-anxiety effect, anti-pain, anti-nausea, as I mentioned, anti-vomiting, and there are one or two others as well, which CBD can do probably via the 5-HT1A receptor. And more speculatively, it could even be its anti-schizophrenic effect might be through that, but that's still to be investigated. Cannabigerol. Right, cannabigerol is another phytocannabinoid, and interestingly, it has the opposite effect to cannabidiol and cannabidiolic acid in that it blocks 5-HT1A receptors. So I sometimes think to myself we should use a different spelling for phytocannabinoids, F-I-G-H-T-O, phytocannabinoids. They fight each other because they can very often have opposite effects. So we've got cannabigerol, which blocks 5-HT1A, and also, and this is not unusual for drugs which target 5-HT1A receptors, it can also target alpha-2 adrenoceptors, and in fact it behaves as a partial alpha-2 adrenoceptor agonist. Collaborators of mine have recently shown the fact that cannabigerol, by acting through alpha-2, can reduce pain. So that could be really interesting potential use for cannabigerol for pain relief. 5-HT1A blockade is interesting because there's some evidence that if you activate 5-HT1A receptors or if you block 5-HT1A receptors, you can get the same therapeutic benefit, strangely enough. And that really reflects the very complex nature of the 5-HT1A receptor role in the brain. But you can either activate or block to reduce the what we call the negative signs of schizophrenia, things like effects on cognitive function and so on. They can be ameliorated with drugs either which activate or which block.
If everything's ready here on the dark side of the moon, play the 5 tones.